Alrighty, hopefully this is better. Let me know if the echo's better and stuff. I don't know if the echo would have necessarily changed since I didn't change positions. But let me know if it has or if it hasn't. Hello, hello. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. I was trying to obviously stream from StreamYard using my camera. Hey, Melanie. Rather than using the camera on the laptop, just hoping that the quality would be better. But hey, Michelle. But if the visual quality is not different, and if there were issues with the audio, then I don't think it's necessarily worth it, especially because the comments were delayed and that was super frustrating. So let me know if there's still an echo, because if there's still an echo, I might try to grab some blankets or something. The room I'm in, the way I'm facing is very empty. Behind me, behind this stuff, there's a bed. No echo. Thank you, Nicole. How are you doing? So we're just going to do live from the laptop rather than try and be fancy. All right. It might be that mic that it might have been coming from my mic on my camera, and it just wasn't. I don't know why the color keeps changing though. That's really weird. It might be my background. I might have to change my background. Hey Mila, how are you? So this goes to show how ghetto I can be. Fancy is overrated. Let's see if it continues to change with a white one. I'm pretty good. I mean, it's Tuesday, so we're not too far through the week yet. So I wish it was Friday. I think we all probably wish it was Friday almost every day, or at least I do. I feel like I never get enough sleep. Even if I sleep like an appropriate amount of time, I'm still tired all the time. All right. I'm probably just going to give it a couple more minutes just in case anybody else wants to come in before we get to chatting. I posed a question and then I got frustrated with the stream, so I want to pose it to everybody again. Whenever we do these lives where we talk about some more serious topics, I don't want to label them as the just chats like we have been. Well, I have been for the last few. I want to label them as something different. Like tonight, what did I label it as? Like open discussion. If you guys have any suggestions on good titles to differentiate between like when we're chatting about commentary and when we're chatting about like some more serious stuff like this, let me know. Can't think of anything different other than like open discussion or something along those lines. Does anybody have anything in particular they want to start off the discussion tonight about substance use? Last time we talked about any kind of had this topic kind of talked about, it was very naturally brought into discussion. So this time it's a little bit different that it's not just naturally flowing. We're just starting the conversation. So I don't know. A lot of people have different experiences when it comes to substances and substance misuse. Some people are somewhat knowledgeable. Some people are very naive when it comes to substances and don't know anything. Some people deal with it personally. Some people have family members who are dealing with it. Is there any aspect like that you guys, a particular area that you guys want to talk about? And while you guys are maybe thinking of that, I will state to you all that I personally have never used any substances. However, professionally, I work with people who are in addiction. My current work is with people who are actively in addiction. And throughout my whole professional career, I have worked with people who are using. So my knowledge as far as what's popular to use, what side effects it has, how it can affect your life, those things. I also have people who are close to me who have had addiction issues. So I have knowledge both personally and professionally in this realm. So I feel very comfortable about talking about this kind of stuff. It doesn't shy me away. That's a common fear, Melanie. And the best thing that you can do, honestly, is to educate them. Like, I know a lot of parents, especially when I was growing up, they more feared, like, if you tell them, they are more likely to want to rebel and use. And that's really not seeming to be the case from what I have experienced. Because if they're curious because they don't know what poor decision making it can lead to, they're not educated about it. They're not taught about it. Schools talk about it very briefly. It's not really something that, at least when I was going to school, it's not something that's really discussed in depth. So I think it really falls on the responsibility of the parents to kind of have those discussions, let them know, let them see the reality of what it's like for people who are using. And I don't necessarily mean like reality TV shows or TV shows where like intervention and things like that. Although those things happen and they do work for some people, they don't work for everybody. So I just think primarily letting your kids know, letting them be educated, making sure you're giving them all the information you can, because if you don't educate them, they're not going to know. They're going to go out into the world and maybe be introduced to it, and then they're not going to know any different, and they're going to fall into peer pressure and maybe make a huge mistake and get addicted to it on the first try. So that's my personal stance on it. 17 is a scary age, absolutely, because they're gaining their independence. They're not usually as reliant on parents. Melody says, you want everybody's take on the 12-step groups. You have concerns that sponsors are not trained professionals. That's true. I mean, to be a sponsor, you don't have to have any kind of training. However, you typically, to become a sponsor, it depends on where you're going to your AA meetings or your NA meetings at. There are people who have had long-term sobriety and who have gone through the thick of it. And most of the time, what you're going to find with 12-step programs is some people struggle with following them due to the faith-based practice of it. And that is what it is. Nowadays, most places that are doing NA or AA and are following the 12-step have cut back on the religion aspect of it. But some people really aren't okay with going to a 12-step meeting because they don't want it to be associated with any kind of religion. You know, I've talked about where I'm at is it's very high Mormonism is the religion here that's very prominent. And I know our 12-step programs that are offered in our area and throughout Utah and most of Idaho are also kind of LDS based in their 12 steps. But there are places that typically, most places will have some groups that aren't going to follow it strict off of religion. Now more places are coming out with alternative 12-step programs that have nothing to do with religion. You know, it really just depends on who you see and who you talk to. I really don't see an issue personally with sponsors not being trained professionals. Hey Sean, how are you? Hey Jen. No notifications. Oh, I don't know how any of that works. You guys know me. I'm YouTube illiterate. So, the reason I don't have an issue with it is because they have had like long-term sobriety, and you don't have to, even if somebody's a sponsor, you don't necessarily have to use that individual as your sponsor. Like if you see any issues with them or you don't feel comfortable with them being your sponsor, that's a conversation that you can have with your group or with that individual and get a different sponsor. You can usually work your way through that. Drug-induced schizophrenia. Some people say it does not exist, but rather is something you are born with. As the drugs erode the brain, this particular disease can and will surface. So it's drug-induced psychosis is what they call it nowadays. And that is a term that they use because you use so many substances that you act like your brain will not function appropriately, and you go into a mental psychosis or a mental break, for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to. Wouldn't be alive for me changing where I'm at for stuff to fall off the wall. So I'm going to talk to you guys, but I'm probably going to be out of frame while I put this back up. So I have never heard it being referred to as schizophrenia, but it is a psychosis that happens. And that is because the substances do mess with your brain and your chemicals. All substances, medications, all of that stuff alters the chemicals in your body and in your thought process. How can I get this to stay up here? You guys only could see what I have just trying to make this stuff work. It's kind of funny. Hopefully, this will keep it from falling. Okay. I think I've got it fixed to where it's not going to fall down again. Sorry for that, guys. Let me catch up. I worry about comorbid conditions being overlooked and the types of things shared. It's just to hear about the spiritual stuff. You have to click on the bell and click all. Yeah, I was going to say, I would think Jen subscribed to quite a few people, so I would think she'd know how to do that. I don't know how to operate that, and I'm so far down on the YouTube chain that it wouldn't matter even if I said anything. It happened to your sister. So yeah, I mean, substances definitely can alter not only your physical being, but your mental being. I don't know how much research and studies have gone into schizophrenia particularly, but schizophrenia is actually a mental illness that doesn't even show, like you can't even be diagnosed until you're an adult. And what happens sometimes, and I'm not saying this in her case particularly, but what will typically happen is someone will have schizophrenia and it will start to show itself. They will start getting the voices and the stuff like that. and they don't know what to do about it, so they start using substances. It is very, very, very common for people with mental health or with anything like that to use substances in a way to try and self-medicate. Melody said, I think people need to be aware that marijuana should not be used under the age of 25 when the brain is completely developed, can cause issues, including schizoaffective disorder. I haven't heard anything like that, but that doesn't surprise me. You know, that's why some medications you can't get until you're an adult because they are going to have side effects on the developing brain, the developing body. You know, it totally makes sense. Marijuana is a super touchy subject, especially in Utah. Um, it's really like I'm coming from Florida, so it was kind of accepted there, and then coming here, it's totally not. So I totally get that. YouTube is weird sometimes. It unchecks for some reason. Yeah, I mean, a lot of creators talk about how YouTube has glitches. And I mean, it's a platform with millions and millions of people, if not billion people on it. So it doesn't surprise me that it goes through glitches and stuff like that. Michelle said 12-step programs are only going to work if okay, I'm kind of happy you made that statement because personally, any kind of rehabilitation, whether it's a 12-step or like you're going into residential or you're an intensive outpatient, no matter what kind of treatment level you're at, it's not going to work if the individual is not on board to stop using substances. First year to fifth year, then leave. Wasn't pretty. Yeah, I mean, the effects of marijuana differ. I really think it's more of an individual base. Like studies need to be done more individual than being done on a wide scale because a lot of the studies now are trying to prove the good things that marijuana can do for people. And I mean, you really can come at that argument with things like Xanax and stuff of that nature. Like, not that I'm saying anything's bad against Xanax, but Xanax is one of the most highly addictive prescription medication along with Adderall because of the effects it gives. People get addicted to it. People get to the point where they can't live without it. They physically can't function a normal life without those prescriptions. Yeah, Mila, it is marijuana is it's always going to be a touchy subject because there are medical ways that it has been proven to assist with certain disorders or certain diseases. It really comes down to the responsibility of the individual who's taking it. Are they going to abuse it? I mean, that's what substance misuse is, or substance abuse, however you want to label it, is the abuse of the substance by an individual. So, I mean, marijuana is a super touchy one. I personally don't have a huge issue with it as long as it's being done legally. Like if you're in a state that legally allows it here in the US and you're using it the way that is recommended for you to use it, then I don't necessarily have an issue with it. But if you're abusing it and relying on it to get through your day, then I think you have a problem. Yeah, Sean, and I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, and I'm not saying this to your friend, but people who use, I'm not saying marijuana is a gateway drug because I don't know if I personally believe that, but once you start using one thing that's illegal, it kind of makes it easier for you to morally be okay with using something else that's illegal. So maybe he was on another substance. It could have been he was on prescription medications and was using that at the same time. That will also deteriorate a person. I mean, medications alone can deteriorate somebody. So I'm sorry to hear that about your friend. I mean, that's unfortunate, but it is the reality. It really is. Like, substance addiction is very, very ugly. And we have a lot of YouTubers that are actually open about their substance use and kind of talk about the struggles and the things that they face with when they were in addiction, and how like untouched with reality they are. Like, they are not in our reality. They are in a different reality, especially if they're using opiates. Exactly. Even vitamins can be bad if you overtake them. I mean, anything can be bad if you overtake it. And it just sucks that, in today's world, with all of the knowledge and education we have about these things, that it just continues to happen, and it's more prevalent now than it ever was, I feel like. And with that being said, like, I kind of run the conspiracy of, is it really more prevalent, or is it now that we have better access to news outlets, to better ways of keeping track of data, if that's the difference? Exactly, Jen. And I mean, it really does boil down to each individual's, like, your chemical being, because there's some substances that you can use one time and be totally addicted to, and then you can have a best friend who can use it, a few times before they become addicted. Yeah, yeah, Sean, I agree. In some of the work I've done in the past before I moved from where I grew up, um, I worked a profession that was super confidential, and I ran into some situations where I wasn't able to do my job because of a conflict of interest from knowing them from high school. And, of course, my company would handle it appropriately, but it's kind of sad to see, like, I stayed in the same area they did, and their life went down a totally different path than mine did. It's scary. Substances in general are scary, both prescription and non-prescription. Of course, the ones that aren't prescribed are more scary because they're not regulated. Like, you don't know what you're getting. You could be getting something laced and not even know it. You think your drug dealer is going to tell you if it's laced? No. I haven't. I really don't pay super attention to marijuana and the effects of marijuana because it changes almost every day. You can search the same topics and related to THC or marijuana, and it will bring up a different result every time. It really depends on what kind of sources you're looking at, where they're coming from, on whether they're going to try and push that it's benefiting or it's not benefiting. I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, anything's really possible. So I mean, I've known quite a few people who have smoked who don't have dementia. It could be a number of things. That's why marijuana is so touchy, because you can, not only are every study different, but it depends on the pool of people you're using for your research. Are you actually using unbiased research? Does size matter? Are you trolling, Allie, or are you serious? So, yeah, marijuana is a tough one, because you're going to hear all kinds of things, especially with it becoming legal in some states. It is being pushed differently. That's why it's so polarizing. It's a very polarizing substance. And like I said, I don't think it's going to be, I personally don't have any issues with it, as long as you're not abusing it. If you're using it in a state, like in a way that is legal for you to use, whether it be medicinally, or I don't fully have an issue if it's legal in your state for you to use it recreationally. I really don't have an issue with that, as long as you're not abusing it. But when people start using things recreationally is when they start to have issues. I mean, this can fall easily into alcohol, because alcohol is legal almost everywhere, and it is one of the most abused substances there is. That's why you have DUIs and stuff like that, because it's so easily and ready and easily attainable, and it's not a super expensive substance either. So it's very easy to drink and to, have the potential of it really affecting your own life or someone else's life. Yeah, and I don't know how they're really monitoring it as medication now. I know like the THC levels are being are adjusted, and the amount that they're allowed to get is restricted for them to use it medicinally. But aside from that, I really don't know. I have, in my professions that I have had dealing with this, like with people who use and who have, some of them do have medical cards. I have only seen about 5 over the last 3 years. They're not necessarily the easiest things to get. I mean, Jen, Jen said, I read an article in some science magazine, and not the first generation of rats having a problem with marijuana, but the offspring of those rats jumping to harder drugs. That's almost proven. If you have if you have parents who had addiction, you are born with an easier ability to become an addict yourself. There's a lot of research to actually back up the fact that if your parents were using, you are more susceptible to become addicted to substances easier. So if you try something that is a hard substance and you had addictive parents, it is pretty likely that you may get addicted to it on the first go round. It just gave access. Yeah. I mean, it does for sure. And that's the same thing with like prescription drugs though, because there are people who I've known, and like when I was rather naive about substances when I was in like high school. I didn't start learning until I went to college. So I was pretty naive about this kind of stuff. And I remember like even when I was in school, like people saying, "Oh, I got an Adderall prescription. I lied to my doctor." That's sad. That's when it becomes an issue. And then they were selling it to each other. And I mean, that's a problem. So anything that you have access to is, depending on who has it, has a potential to be abused. So, I mean, I'll be personal with you guys. I have in almost every other way. My biological mom, if you've seen my story, was a drug addict. And I do have an addictive personality. There was a short time in my life where I was drinking excessively and it had to be brought to my attention. Um, I also smoked cigarettes until very recently. So I definitely have an addictive personality. So, and I know for sure my biological mom used substances, and you have to really keep in mind, I wasn't raised by her. I was raised in the custody of the state. So it was a genetic issue. And that's not necessarily to fully blame her. I mean, there could be, other things that had also affected my judgment at those particular times of my life. But I mean, overall, it is known and it has almost been proven. Yeah, it does go back to body chemistry, your DNA, genetics. It comes back to all of that. You're predisposed to it, especially if you were in the womb and your parent was using, which was the case for me. I'm lucky in the sense, and I don't mean this next comment to come off bad, but I am lucky in the sense that I wasn't born with any deformities. Um, and that I had, like, all of my organs are fully functioning to the point they should be, because some substances can cause offspring not only to have dependency issues, but to have physical deformities. I mean, even a pack of cigarettes has a warning on it. So when you're using street substances while you're pregnant, you are really amping up the risk for your child to have defects. So, and I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we can get into, is like substance use affecting families, affecting friends, because an addict really starts, once they become addicted to any substances, their whole way of life changes. Who they are almost changes instantly. The second they seriously fall into addiction, they are different. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person they were is gone forever, but the longer that they're in that addiction, the harder it is to get that person back. So Sean asked if I felt the impulses. Is it something that dawned on me, or was it input from others? So it was kind of a combination of both for me. When I was drinking heavily, I my husband was deployed at the time, so, my main support system wasn't with me, so I did initially not really realize I was drinking as heavily as I was, until I started looking at our bank account, and I was like, I paid attention to how much money I was spending on going out, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Obviously, there's something going on here. I need to adjust. Did I necessarily change that behavior when I noticed that? No, I didn't. I didn't stop until it was brought to my attention by my parents, and my mom sat me down, and I don't think we were face to face. I talked to my mom almost every day at this point, and she just told me that she was concerned for how I was behaving and that I was going out all the time. Um, so, and it started to slowly affect my work. Like, I was having a hard time getting up and getting ready for work. I was younger. I was a lot younger. So I was able to, when you're really young, able to go out all night and then manage to get up and be functional the next day. But it started to become evident to me, like I was having a hard time waking up in the mornings, and things like that. So once my mom talked to me, I had kind of seen some of the signs myself, but I didn't listen to them. Once she talked to me, I did cut back on, I didn't stop. I mean, I was very early 20s, so I managed my going